Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back for part two. Thank you to those who watched, liked, subscribed, sent me messages, whatever, after the first video. It's appreciated. So, in the first video, I left off telling stories about Fireman. Um, and part two, it's going to be a continuation of Academy stories. I don't remember all the stories in order, so I'm kind of just going to share them as they pop into my head. Um, yeah, so this should be pretty fun. Should be fun. Um, so, Fireman, right? Um, the reason why he's called Fireman is because he told everybody in our academy class that he was a fireman. Um, we found out otherwise as the class was going on. He was basically like a pathological liar. And unfortunately for him, we had somebody in the class that was actually previously a fireman. So he would say some things that would kind of raise some red flags. It really didn't help his case when we were doing fire extinguisher training, and he didn't know how to use that. I don't know what kind of fireman doesn't know how to use a fire extinguisher. That shit would be kind of crazy to me. Like, imagine you run into a building, you're ready to save these lives, but then you gotta stop because, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Yeah. Anyways, I also ended up looking this guy up on Facebook later on, and his name was Blank Screws Blank. So first name, I guess his nickname was Screws because he got some loose, and then his last name. But on his Facebook, he had his fireman training schedule. You know how Academy has training schedule. Firefighter, not fireman. He had his firefighter training schedule, which was kind of strange because the times were the same exact times as the academy, so I don't really know how he'd be attending both. Maybe he was on a video call all class and I just never noticed it. But yeah, that was one strange thing about him. He also claimed to work 20 different jobs simultaneously. At one point he said, obviously the firefighter thing, and then he also said he was like a butcher. Like, his family had a family farm, so he was also doing a butcher thing and running part of his family farm. And then he said he was a plumber, I think a self-defense instructor, and a whole bunch of other shit all at once. So I don't do the math. You can only be in so many places at one time. There's only so many hours in a day, days in a week. But yeah, so going back to the academy classes, one thing I distinctly remember is we were doing, we did this social experiment. They had everybody with brown eyes in one group, everybody with blue eyes in another group. The people with blue eyes stepped into the hallway first. And at this point, it was in the, we're talking about racial discrimination and shit like that. So it was at this point I'm like, oh well, I kind of see what's happening here. Ethnic people typically have brown, black eyes, where Caucasians, they have blue, green, haze. They have a whole assortment, right? So it made sense to me because they wanted Caucasian, the Caucasian participants to understand what it felt like to be discriminated against. So once the people with the colored eyes were in the hallway, the instructor told us, yo, we're not going to ask you any questions. We're going to only ask the people in the hallway the questions when they come back in. and they're not going to know the answers, and we're just going to tell them like the people with brown eyes were so much smarter. You know, like elementary school type shit, right? So the people with blue eyes came back in, and the instructor started grilling them, right? Like, what is this? And on page blah blah blah, what does this mean? And nobody knew the answers, right? Like, it was very early in the process. Nobody knew the answers, and um, like I said, we had a class of like 38. So if you split it in half, half brown eyes, half blue eyes, that goes down to 19. 4 or 5 of the people in the blue-eyed group, they were so upset at being grilled that they just stormed out of their room. So, I mean, you take 4 and 19, that's just like 25%, right? 20%. That's a lot of people. But after the experiment, they went and talked these people into coming back into the room. My roommate was one of these people that was very frustrated. So when they came back into the room, the instructors asked, like, yo, how'd that make you feel? And they went through and they're upset, like real upset, obviously you can tell because they stormed out of the room. But when it came to my roommate, Fireman, this instructor was a female. I want to point that out. And he did his head nod thing, right? And he's like, yo, to be honest, I wanted to take my chair and beat you over the face with it. I was like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just not that serious, Fireman. Like, that's a red flag right there. Nothing happened to him. I don't know. Like, my thoughts were, they kept telling us, like, when you go into prison, you have to be prepared to, be called a lot of things, right? Like, you're walking up and down the ranges, dealing with these inmates. They don't like you. They're going to call you some shit. So you have to emotionally prepare yourself to handle being called a variety of, colorful words, right? So if you can't even handle this, how are you supposed to handle that? So that was something that popped into my head. And another person, he was a short little guy. He was nice. He was a nice guy. But we just didn't vibe on this moment. He started talking about how, like, upset it made him. And I, like, raised my hand afterwards. I was like, to be honest, I think it's kind of funny, like, how upset you guys are. And he got all up in his feelings, and he was like, well, that's not very nice of you to think that. Like, obviously we're upset. And I'm like, hold up. The reason I think it's funny is because, like, you guys can turn that shit off, right? Like, this experiment ends and that's it for you. Whereas, like, people that actually deal with it, we don't have an off button. And, the logic makes sense to me. He wasn't feeling it at the time. I got no problems with the dude. It's just that one moment. I don't know how, you, the viewers, feel about that. But, yeah, so that was one experience. And also in this racial discrimination thing, he said some other shit that just made me like, bro, what the fuck? He raised his hand, right? And he was like, if I think that I might be like racially biased, how can I not do that? Fam. My first thought was, well, start by not asking stupid shit like that. Like, and how can you say in a class, like, first off, dude said he wanted to beat the instructor over the head with a chair. Now he's openly stating that he might be racist. Why would you take this individual and then put him in an environment where he has control over not only African American inmates, but just inmates in general? Like, that doesn't seem like somebody that you would want to be in that type of situation. So, some other fireman stories. Let's see here. There's one. we have this self-defense training. It's called POSC. Um, I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's outdated. It's trash. It doesn't really help anybody. But you got to include it so we can check off that box on the list. But during POSC training was something else. Um, Part of our dress code, we had to wear a uniform, and then we had to have all black shoes or boots. They recommended steel toe boots because when you're in the prison, you never know what's going to happen, so it's a little extra protection. Well, steel toe boots are not the best for physical activity, right? So I remember we were in the room, and I think I just got done. I just got back from the gym, and I was changing my shoes, and he's like, "Oh, you got any shoes for POSC?" I was like, "Oh no, I should get some." He's like, "Yeah, steel toes probably aren't the best." I said, "Yeah, I'd feel bad if I accidentally kicked somebody with them, right?" And he said, "Yeah, if you kicked me, I'd have to punch you in the face." So I thought, like at this time, I thought this was just friendly banter, like boys being boys, guys being guys, shit like that. So I was like, "Bro, if you punch me in the face, I'm gonna have to whip your ass." And he said, "Now this is a crazy," but he said, "Well, if you did that, I'd have to go to my car, grab my gun, and shoot you." I was like, "Bro, what the fuck?" And I said right then and there, I was like, "You are the reason I'm pro gun control." And then he's like, "Well, what do you mean?" I was like, "Fireman, like you said you're gonna shoot me in the face. Like, what's wrong with you?" And he said, "Well, we need guns for self-defense." And I said, "Well, this area is super safe. Like, we live in a very safe area, especially compared to like, you know, I mean, I'm close to us. So I'm gonna say Chirac, right? Compared to Chirac, like, we got it good." Um, so I was like, when are you gonna need it for self-defense?" And he's like, "Well, if somebody breaks into my home." And I said, "Fireman, if I break into your home, I promise you, I'm gonna have my gun to your head before you can wake up and like realize what's going on and grab your gun." You know what I'm saying? And he said, "Well, that's why I sleep with a gun under my pillow." All right, well, even still, like, if I creep up on you, if I have it pressed to your head, like, by the time you wake up, realize what's going on, reach under your pillow, grab it, like, I would have already pulled the trigger. And his response to that was, well, that's also why I sleep with a knife under my pillow. And now, like, this man's has a whole arsenal of weapons under his pillow, I guess. Thank God he didn't have them, in our bedroom. But apparently at home, he sleeps with a knife and a gun under his pillow. But I said, same concept. Like, still, by the time you wake up, realize what's going on, grab that knife, like, I would have pulled the trigger. And then this is when he told me he has special self-defense training. I was like, because at this point in time, like, I didn't believe any of the shit that this dude was saying. So I said, "All right, what's it called?" He's like, "I can't tell you." Like, what do you mean you can't? Like, is it top secret? Like, why can't you tell me? And I pressed him on it a little bit. And then he said he instructed self-defense at NWTC, which is a technical college in Wisconsin. So I said, "Well, if you can't tell me what it is, like, how's anybody supposed to sign up for this class, right? Like, if nobody knows what it is, why would they sign up?" And he didn't really have an answer for that. So I was like, "Well, can you at least tell me what it's based out of? Like, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, et cetera, et cetera." And he said he couldn't. Well, I pressed him a little more. And he ended up telling me that this self-defense training was called self-defense reverse psychology. Yeah. So, like, that's reverse psychology. Like, that's a mental thing, right? Like, I'm pretty sure everybody catches that. So I don't know what type of self-defense reverse psychology class he's teaching where you have guns and knives under your pillow and you're trained to respond to somebody robbing your house and pressing, I don't know. But that shit was weird. That shit was real weird. Um, yeah. So another fireman story. Um, yeah, last video I said he reported me for prostitution or soliciting prostitution, right? Well, he would go to this bar and the lazy oaf, right? The same thing from the first video. And he ended up reporting like 3 different women to academy instructors as being prostitutes. I think like the way it plays out in my head is a dude sitting at this bar, probably by himself, guaranteed by himself, and like it's a bar, people are social, so they slide up to get a drink and just say something to be nice, and he's immediately like prostitute. You know what I mean? Like I don't understand. I don't understand the logic on that, but apparently reporting myself and 3 other people as being prostitutes wasn't a red flag for the academy instructors. Um, another another story. Yeah. Um, let's see. Let's see. Okay. So this one, my girlfriend's probably gonna want to plug her ears. Yeah, Luann, if you're watching, this is where you want to turn it off. So I was like 23 when the academy was going on. This one, Tinder first came out, and I go from small town to big city, right? So I got to have my Tinder game popping, right? Well, I matched with this girl. She's a nice girl. She's attractive, and we're gonna hang out. So she was like a nursing student, and her parents were kind of, I mean, they're wealthy. They had a home in Madison, one in Chicago, and we're gonna hang out, like get some drinks and then hang out. But my roommate made it less than optimal. So I asked if we go to her place. She said no. I mean, I get it. Number one, it's her parents' home. Number two, I'm like some random dude that she just meet. Like, why does she want to invite me to her home alone? I get that shit. So I said, fuck it. I'll ask my roommate. So I asked my roommate, right? And initially he said no. To have guests over, one of the academy rules is you need your roommate's permission, right? So I said, all right. I took it as it was. So we went down to the hot tub, and some of the other guys in the academy knew that I was like talking to this girl, like trying to hang out with her, right? So then they asked if that was going to happen. And I said, nah, probably not. And they said, well, why not? And I'm like, well, you need your roommate's permission. And I didn't get it. So, well, they started grilling John a little bit. And finally he said yes, right? So I'm like, I bet. I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to shower. Because you don't want to go to a first date smelling like chlorine, right? Well, he came up too. And I remember as he was putting the car key into the door, he turned and he looked at me and he's like, no hanky panky, unless I'm asleep, because I sleep like a rock. So, I mean, questionable word choice with hanky panky. I mean, personally, I don't use that in my vocabulary, but I didn't give a shit. He gave permission. From my college experiences, it's not that strange. I mean, y'all get what I'm saying, right? So, I went out. I mean, I showered. I went out, met with this girl. We had some drinks, and we went back, back to the room. So, Fireman was asleep, and we went into, me and this girl. We went into my bed, and we made out a little bit. Nothing too crazy, but we made out a little bit. Well, I remember I got up to pee, right? And when I came back and I crawled into the bed, this girl, she looked at me and she said, he's awake. I was like, what? Really? She's like, yeah, he's been watching. And that was weird to me. Like, all right, it's not weird if, the roommates in the room, like, that's college vibes, right? But it is weird for the roommate to be watching. Like, me, I would have been like, or, make some type of like little notion, like, you're not asleep and you're not awake. Nah, dude was awake. Um, so, I mean, I wasn't gonna fight him over it. I guess he got his share, but we passed out, and when I woke up, Fireman was gone. Like I said, he gets to the academy early. We had POS training, so we'd go to the academy site, and they'd shuttle us to the training location on a bus. And once we got there, we're all in like this big auditorium room. That's where we did our training. And one of the instructors asked to speak to me outside, right? And I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. So when I got into the, side room or the hallway, wherever, we were by ourselves, he asked, he was like, so you had somebody over last night? I was like, yeah. He said, well, did you get your roommate's permission first? I was like, yeah. He gave me permission in front of multiple people. And he said, well, that's not what he's telling us. I'm like, what do you do with that? If somebody says that you could do something, and then they turn around and say that they didn't. So I was just like, well, he said I could have a guest, and there's other academy members that witnessed it, and he's like, well, we don't know that for sure. Personally, I'd be okay, who? And then I'd ask the other academy members, and if the story matches, then I'd be like, oh, okay, problem solved. Well, that didn't happen. He's like, well, we might have to, kick you out of the academy. You gotta talk to the director first. It's like, well, this is cool. So I went back, did the training or whatever, and when we got back to the main location, the director spoke to me and Fireman, and she basically told us that we were being immature and that we're lucky that we're not getting kicked out of the academy. That's one thing that the instructors love to say. They told us multiple times that we're like the worst class ever, and if they could fire every one of us right now, they would, and that we're lucky like the hiring requirements have decreased because none of us would make it. I don't know. Like, for a place that's short staffed, they didn't really do much to make people want to stay. But yeah, so now I'm in a position where I'm like, I'm gonna get kicked out for what? Like, I did what I was supposed to do. So after that, Fireman and I went back to the hotel, and when we got into the room, like, I wasn't even yelling, like, I wasn't even angry or nothing like that. Like, I was annoyed, but I wasn't like, I wasn't fired up. And we got into the room. I was like, yo, Fireman, I think we need to have a talk. And I said it just like that. And his response was, he was like, I don't want to talk to you right now. Like, again, I'm confused. 'Cause I'm like, why are you angry at me when you're the one that reported me after, you know what I mean? Like, that shit didn't make sense to me. I'm like, he's like, I'm so angry with you right now. I can't even talk. Like, okay. I guess I'll leave the room then. Like, I'll just go hang out in a different room. And he's like, no, that's fine. I'm getting a different room. So I said, you don't got to do that. Like, I'll just go spend the night in another person's room. Like, that's cool. Well, he ended up getting a different room anyways. So I got the room to myself, which, I mean, is kind of nice. Not much changed. But that reminds me of a different different fireman stories. So, like I said, dude would wake up early in the morning, right? Um, well, one thing he would do, he would go to the bathroom and not flush. Like he would take a dookie and just leave it floating in the toilet. So one day I got back from the gym and I dropped my clothes like in that crevice between the bed and the wall, and he made a comment about it being like nasty or gross or something like that. And my response was, "Oh, you mean like when you take shits in the morning and you don't flush the toilet?" He's like, "I don't do that." Fireman, it's just you and me in this room, right? So like, if it's not me, it has to be you. And he said, "Well, maybe it's the cleaning staff." Fireman, I don't think the cleaning staff is coming into our room and taking shits in the toilet while I'm sleeping, bro. He said, "Well, I used to be a plumber, and the way that some toilets work is that, they suction it upwards. Um, so maybe it doesn't have enough power to go up. And then after I flush, it just kind of, floats a little up and comes back down." It's like, nah, I don't think that's it either. But yeah, those are some more fireman stories. There's more. Um, but like I said, I'm doing this one take, so I'm kind of just doing them as they come to mind. A different one for training, we did on-site training, right? So like we all trained at the main academy, but afterwards we go to our locations. So they had us do like a 1 day at our location to kind of see how it is. And after we got back, so Fireman ended up going to Green Bay, which is a max. Yeah, that's bad news. But on his tour, he came across an inmate with like a bulge in their shirt, right? Like at the baseline. And, he's not like a sworn in officer or anything at this time. But he told the inmate to remove the object and like, show him what it was. And there's two other people in the academy that went with him to Green Bay. So I heard this from the other two people that were there. But apparently the inmate was like, "No, it's a colostomy bag. Like I can't take it off." And Fireman kept insisting that this guy remove this object, which it was a colostomy bag. And when the inmate wouldn't, he like ran and reported it to the sergeant that the inmate had contraband and was refusing to turn it over, and shit like that. Like, I don't know how these weren't red flags for anybody in the academy. He also didn't pass any of his tests. I think we had 3 tests and a final. It was basically like a test at the end of the week and then one comprehensive final. The way it's supposed to work is that if you fail a test, like you're done, bro. Like that's it. Goodbye. That didn't happen though. There's multiple people that failed multiple tests that still got pushed through the academy. Again, they're short-staffed. I know for a fact that this happened because my roommate, like I said, he couldn't read, right? So how do you pass a test if you can't read the questions? And he asked me to help him study. So like, despite all this shit that happened, I still helped this dude study, right? So it's for like the final test. And like when I was trying to help him study, he couldn't read the questions, or he couldn't. So how do you pass these tests? And one thing that like in retrospect or that I've thought of is we have a policy called deadly force. So it's basically the steps that need to happen before you could use deadly force, so it's justified. And we're supposed to remember all the answers and then take the test and pass that test. Well, there's multiple people that failed that too. And it's always kind of bothered me that like So I know dude didn't pass. He didn't pass. He doesn't know the deadly force. Like I don't remember that shit now, but at the time I did. Um, but how can you certify somebody to be in a position where they're armed or have to use force in general? Because it's not. There's a deadly force policy, but then also just a use of force. But how can you put somebody in position to do that when they can't even read the policy to understand when it's justifiable? You know. Um, yeah. So that's my video. Two thoughts. It's already been 30 minutes. There's still more Academy stories, unfortunately. So, or fortunately for anybody who's watching, I guess. But yeah, I'm gonna stop the video here. Next video, I'll share some more Academy stories. And other than that, hey, I appreciate anybody that's tuning in and watching, following along, showing support, all of that. And I hope you have a good day. Thank you.